Hello, everyone. Welcome to Take Charge of Your Health. I'm your host, Sose Stojkovic. When we get sick, what are the first things that we think about as reasons? A lot of sickness we know is the result of poor lifestyle choices. But how often do we actually think about mold as the cause of sickness? That's what we'll be talking about today with Dr. John Clark, who, as always, will share with us his experience and research in the field. I'm excited to learn more on this topic. Before we welcome our speaker, I'll just remind everyone that we will have a Q&A segment at the end of the presentation. So please write your questions in the chat section of our live broadcast on YouTube and Rumble. We may not be able to broadcast on Rumble today, but we will make it available for future sessions. And as time allows, after the presentation, we will address that. So let's welcome our speaker, Dr. Clark. Welcome back to the program. Nice to have you back.
Good to be back. Thank you, Sosie.
Thank you. So I'm excited. It's not such a great thing, but I'm excited to talk about mold today because as you have in the title, it seems to be the missing link to disease, right? We're talking more about it, which is good.
Yes. No, people need to understand this topic.
Yeah. And I was actually watching a documentary as we're talking about this topic now. I was watching a documentary about a family who was affected by mold. They had a leak somewhere that the company that was supposed to fix it didn't fix it in time. And so the company didn't fix it in time, and so they started experiencing some health issues. The dad of the family started experiencing Alzheimer type of health issues. The son started having learning difficulties, and the wife was having coughing and bleeding at the same time. And she finally found out that it is because of mold, and they had to demolish the whole house. And after they did that, the wife recovered, but the son and the husband just never recovered. They just have to be monitored constantly for the learning difficulties that the son has, and the husband for his Alzheimer type. And he was only in his 30s, so they were surprised at how he can have early onset of Alzheimer's. So it's really serious, isn't it?
Oh yeah, boy, that's a good story. Yeah, no, that's those all fit in.
Yeah. And we know you've got more stories and more research to share with us. So let's start with a word of prayer, and then we'll get into it. Dear Lord, we thank you so much today for the opportunity to discuss health again, and the missing link that many of us may be overlooking when it comes to health. We want to thank you for our speaker, Dr. John Clark. We ask you to bless him as he speaks, and bless all of us with our hearts and minds, that we will be receptive, and we will be able to learn and share with others as well. We thank you and ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Well, mold, the hidden link to disease. And really, mold puts off toxins, and that's what causes the disease. It's toxins that when they get to your body, it raises inflammation. I woke up one morning, I was all stiff, sore, tired, my back hurt. I didn't feel like getting out of bed, and I was thinking, I must be getting old. But I wasn't that old. Well, not that old now. But I was thinking, this is not good. I'm supposed to be the guy teaching health, and I'm not healthy. And why is this? And we had gone to traveling around the country in a camper, right here pictured. And so I looked around. If you look at that camper, there's a big square, looks like a window without a window, there in the front part of that camper, almost over the pickup truck, over the ute. And that thing is where our bed was. It popped out about 2 feet, and the bed slid out with it. And that thing had a rubber roof on it, and the rubber roof started leaking. And so when I looked around, I discovered, oh, there's a leak and there's mold on the edges of the and in the corners of the what we call pop out. And I'm thinking, boy, this isn't good. This must be a problem. So I took it apart, cleaned it up, sealed it with some glue, caulking stuff, siliconed it, and next night I went to bed, woke up like I was 20 years younger. No more aches and pains, no more feeling like I had no energy. It was like night and day. I was like, wow. And it was that mold that did it to me. Wasn't too long ago, we were staying at a friend's place and they let us rent their extra house. And we didn't have any furniture, but they had a wonderful, big, thick mattress down in the basement in a bedroom. And they said, you can, feel free to use that mattress. So we moved in, put our sheets on the mattress. And again, I didn't feel good and felt achy. And I thought, I sniffed around the mattress and it didn't smell good. So I went down to a U-Haul store, a store that sells supplies for moving, and I bought a polyethylene mattress bag, something you'd use to ship the mattress in and keep it nice and clean. Fairly thick polyethylene plastic. And so I stuck the mattress in that bag and then I taped it up really good so it was basically airtight. And went to sleep on it the next night and woke up fine. It was all coming out of that old mattress. So we quickly abandoned that old mattress and moved up to a different bedroom in the house. And so I've had some experience with mold. I could tell you other stories. But yeah, common symptoms of mold. I mean, this is, people need to understand this. It can be like muscle weakness or joint pain. You think you got arthritis? Maybe you have molditis. Fatigue, weakness. I mean, everybody thinks they could complain of that at times, but a lot of people have mold in their environment. And then there's neurocognitive dysfunction, can't think straight. You're talking about this gentleman that got Alzheimer's. And then there's sinusitis or postnasal drip, or always feeling full in the back of your throat, always feeling like you need to clear your throat, or something's hanging in the back of your throat, headaches and gastrointestinal problems. I mean, within the last 5 days, I did a consult with a person who complaining of gastrointestinal problems as a result of mold exposure. And headaches are very common too. And it affects the lungs, and the ultimate effect is shortness of breath. That's sort of a late thing. Um, you mentioned the cough, and then there's the mind effects, anxiety, feeling stressed about the future. This was what was happening with this person that I was talking to just recently. Depression, irritability. Then there's what happens to your eyes, floaters or blurred vision. Um, and I mean, back to the neurocognitive. Oh, we might on the street call it brain fog. So they get brain fog, and then chest tightness goes along with the shortness of breath. Insomnia, can't sleep, wake up early, wake up not feeling rested, dizziness, numbness and tingling. Then there's laryngitis, always have a frog in your throat, as we say. Nausea, and that's still a third. You see the little numbers there. It's decreasing in frequency, but we're still a third of people getting nausea. Skin rashes and skin. I don't know why skin rashes is only 27%. I would have thought it would be much higher because a lot of people complain of that. And then there's tremors, kind of shake a bit, and then 1/5 of people having, heart palpitations. They can feel their heart beating or arrhythmias. So this is a big list, and this is a lot of things. I mean, didn't we call this mold the hidden link to disease? Well, a lot of people would call each one of these little things here, each one of these bullet points, a disease. Everything from muscle and joint pain to headaches to insomnia. I mean, and so maybe you have mold in your environment. God forbid. And so, what is it that brings on mold? Well, dampness. And the classic thing, the person I was talking to recently, they lived in several uh, campers or caravans and houses that had leaks in the roof. The roof had um, places where water could get in, and the water had come down into a wall or a room, a ceiling, and so then they get mold. And so you want to keep your house dry, make sure the roof is good, first of all. But then otherwise, if you're in a very high humidity area, well, we lived way up north in Queensland for a while, um, up above Townsville, and it was pretty wet up there. And so it was very important to keep things dry, wipe down walls, spray walls with clove oil mixture. Um, yeah, and so sometimes you need a dehumidifier, air conditioning to reduce the moisture in the air in the home that's in the areas. So here I have a picture of a bathroom with a ceiling that just looks terribly moldy. Bathrooms are big places where it's always wet or likely to be wet, and so being able to keep windows open or dehumidifier going, very important. If you smell something musty, moldy, you will get sick. That's what the studies show. They studied people who could smell something, effect, they get sick. And this is a serious thing. I mean, why live in a place that you can smell mold? And people get so they don't smell it. We have a friend right now, lives in a house where we smell mold, and they got asthma. Asthma is a big thing. That's part of that those lung symptoms listed earlier. But asthma, that's considered autoimmune. And so we have a whole talk on autoimmune, but autoimmune diseases. And so this is part of the problem. And if you have a building that everybody's getting sick in it, we call it the sick building syndrome. We have a friend who was working in the hospital, and they sent them out to work in a separate building, and the building had the reputation, and everybody got sick in there. And sure enough, she started getting sick in there. And what happens is once you've got this in a building, um, you talked about the family ended up destroying their house, tearing down their house. I mean, it's in my estimation, it's nearly impossible to get it out of all the porous materials that are involved in building. You got wood, you got um, paint, you got flooring, carpets, you name it, and they're hard to get things out of, and you can't really get deep into them to destroy the stuff. So, and we'll talk about this in the Bible. They made you destroy your house if it got mold. So mycotoxins have been shown to be very toxic and harmful, and it's no wonder that many inhabitants of these living spaces are constantly ill. Things like thyroid cancer. My mom and stepdad got mold in their house. Pretty soon my mom had uterine cancer, and my stepdad had prostate issues. So, yeah, and a lot of upper respiratory tract infections are a result of mold, lethargy, constant headaches, nausea, ill feelings. And so people who live in this place for any period of time they're going to end up probably with, well, autoimmune disease or cancer as the big ones. And you think about where does, let's suppose you don't have a water leak. What's another area that mold can come from? Well, it has to do with how much dust you have in your house. And most dust in your house is your skin flaking off. When your skin flakes off, dust mites grow on it and mold can grow on it. And so this can contaminate indoor air. And you might see, like here, I got two people, but ignore the people and look at the beam of light. It's coming through some kind of dusty air. And so the air is going to be filled with aspergillus mold toxins, skin sloughing off, all kinds of things. And so keep your air clean. How do I keep my air clean? Well, definitely open windows for fresh air. You might need to put in a HEPA filter filtering system, or you might need to do some what do you call it? Ozone um, ozone treatments. You can get these little machines that will do ozone. Let's see. Um, you can buy them here and there. Here I got one air purifier that does ozone and negative ions. So here's ozone release, and here's negative ions. They're easy to come by, and sometimes you want to use a little machine like that to help knock down the amount of mold. And let's see. Let me go on here. The next one is what's that? Looks like decaying vegetables. What do we call that? Compost heap. And whenever you have a compost heap with decaying vegetables around, if they are upwind of your house, then the mold and the decaying stuff is going to put stuff in the air that's going to float to your house. I was dealing with a child down in New South Wales who had acquired type 1 diabetes. And I said, "Where's their bedroom? What's outside the window?" "Oh, the compost heap is outside the window." "Oh." And so no vegetable wastes or heaps of fallen leaves should be allowed to remain near the house to decay and poison the air. Nothing unclean or decaying should be tolerated within the home. If you have a compost bin and it smells, you want to take it outside all the time. Um, in towns or cities that are regarded as perfectly healthful, many an epidemic of fever has been traced to decaying matter about the dwelling of some careless householder. So you want to make sure that your neighbors are clean people, because if they have a big mold jungle growing in their backyard and it's blowing down your way, you're at risk. So exposure to mold has the problem of mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are what mold produces. Here we have a little picture under a microscope of aspergillus mold. And so mold exposure in water damaged buildings, what it does is it wipes out your natural killer cells. Natural killer cells are some of the white cells that fight cancer, fight inflammation, control autoimmune disease. So living in a home with mold problems increases the risk of respiratory tract infections and symptoms as well. Now, two things that definitely help with mold. One is sunlight. You want to have plenty of good windows with good exposure toward where the sun's going to be. Southern hemisphere, you're going to want to north exposure, northern hemisphere, south exposure windows, and then being able to open those windows for fresh air. The other problem is if you have a lot of vegetation around the house. The plants have been growing too much. The trees are growing up. The vines are growing up. And shade trees and shrubbery too close and dense around the house are unhealthful. For they prevent the free circulation of air and shut out the rays of the sun. In consequence of this, dampness gathers in the home, especially in wet seasons and sleeping rooms. They become damp, and those who occupy them are troubled with rheumatism or rheumatoid arthritis, neuralgia, lung complaints, which generally end in consumption or disease. So we lived way up north in the United States, in Maine, and the north side of our house grew moss. That's sort of a close cousin to mold. And so I ended up having to do things to clean that up. You can do things like power wash or use um, strong bleach or different mold cleanup chemicals. Um, so numerous shade trees cast off many leaves, which, if not immediately removed, decay and poison the atmosphere. I've been spending a few days recently out getting some wheelbarrow loads of leaves from around our house and hauling them a few hundred yards downwind of us, or you know, um, maybe 100 meters. So a yard full of trees and shrubbery at a proper distance from the house has a happy, cheerful influence upon the family, and if well taken care of, will prove no injury to health. Dwellings, if possible, should be built upon high and dry ground. So where I'm living here now, I'm at the highest part of our property, and still there's a lot of during a rain, there's a lot of water around, but at least it doesn't sit here. It goes down to the other end of our property. If a house is built where water settles around it, remaining for a time, and then drying away, a poisonous miasma arises, and fever and ague, sore throat, lung diseases, and fevers will be the results. And I went and lectured at an institution where they had a river nearby, and I talked to the farm manager, and he says, "We have a lot of flat land down there by the river, but it's so full of mold, I can't grow anything on it." I was praised. And so a lot of people that go there get serious diseases, such as um, ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, um, Lou Gehrig's disease. Um, and so that's a problem. Mold exposure in water damaged buildings initiates the inflammatory process and reduces your cancer fighting natural killer cells. You have a picture of a very moldy looking house. So let's talk a little bit about the biblical principles. And I'm not going to read all this, but in the Bible, if you got mold in your house, you basically had, they called it leprosy, and the priest had to come and check it out. And then if he found leprosy in your house, then he would condemn the house, and you'd have to see if you could remove it, and he'd shut the building up for 7 days, and you had to scrape the walls and everything, and you see if you could clean it up, and then he'd come back and look again, and if he found mold there again, then I mean, if it wasn't going to get cleaned up, you're just going to have to um, destroy the house. And so that's an important lesson. I mean, how many people are willing to destroy their house? But you said the people in the video that you watched had to destroy their house, and that's really the biblical principle. Because here they got jackhammers and they're taking up tile. I imagine tile is probably the easiest thing to clean, but there's a lot of stuff that's harder to clean than tile. But you might be saying my house is perfectly fine, and maybe it is. A lot of people don't get it from their houses. They don't get the mold from their wet basement. They get the mold in their food. So mold in your food can cause inflammation, immunosuppression, and cancer. And anything created with fermenting, aging, spoiling, rotting can have mold in it. Aflatoxins. This would be like cheese, wine, vinegar. I mean, any food created through the fermentation process. And you just think about all the foods that have fermentation in them: chocolate, coffee, vanilla, brown rice syrup, soy sauce, miso tempeh, yogurt, sauerkraut. I mean, there's just lots of foods that just aren't fresh. And when they're not fresh, these little rascals, the molds and bacteria can grow on them. And so you have aflatoxins in your foods. And some foods are mold, okay, what is mold? It's filamentous fungi. What's a mushroom? Filamentous fungi. What's yeast? Filamentous fungi. I mean, they're all related. And so yeast and mushrooms and mold, they're all going to be part of the problem. And some foods, by the way, they are hard to get to market without being wet. And so peanut are like a bean in a pod that grows underground. You have to dig them up. and you can't dig them out of a dirt clod, so you have to have the ground somewhat damp. And so the peanuts come out damp. And then you have to take those peanuts and get them dried before they mold. And oh boy, that's hard. They get moldy quite quickly, especially if you harvested them in wet weather and the sun's not shining. I grew up on a farm. We grew peanuts. They were always getting moldy. And so it's hard to find peanut butter that doesn't smell like a bit of mold to me. And having grown up on the farm and smelled the mold, I can tell you what it smells like, or at least I know what it smells like. And so, yeah, the list of things that are moldy or could be a part of this problem is pretty long. And you just want to avoid things that are fermented. You might be thinking, oh, wait a minute. I got people from a whole nother discipline of healthcare that claim that molds or fermentation is wonderful. You should eat, here we have yogurt and tempeh and vanilla, and just you eat the moldy stuff and consider it a blessing. Not so, according to studies. We're talking here about mold and the complications of mold, and so it's a big problem. So let's just we'll think about that in another term. What about probiotics? And well, you get your probiotics from good food. I mean, fresh cabbage has lots of probiotic. You don't have to rot it and make it sauerkraut to get probiotic. Where do you think it came from? Why it has probiotic? It was there in the fresh as well as in the fermented. Now, some people think they're going to be enterprising and they'll put the mold to work for them. And so mold is used to manufacture things. Some straight mold and some genetically modified mold, but citric acid, they take corn and ferment it with mold and get citric acid. Soy sauce, they purposely add mold to it. Certain drugs, lovastatin. You're thinking, you mean I got drugs that are made out of mold? Oh, this is a big issue. Antibiotics. And I can't remember if I put a recent slide in here, but I've been studying antibiotics recently. And the antibiotics, a lot of them are mold, right? Penicillin is nothing but a mold. These antibiotics, if you take them for any length of time, your risk of cancer starts going up because mold causes cancer. Amylases, pills they use for digestive enzymes, made from mold. Lipases, same thing. And what is the toxic downside? What does it do? It's carcinogenic, causes cancer. It causes cancer of the liver, especially. It's immunotoxic, meaning that your immune system is damaged by it. It's nephrotoxic, meaning your kidneys are affected by it. It's teratogenic, meaning that your babies, if you're going to have a baby, if you're pregnant, it's going to be affected by it. And one of the reasons that pregnancies are affected by it is that these molds have estrogenic effects. And so women get into their perimenopausal years and they're going into menopause and they have a lot of difficulties. It could be the estrogenic effects of mycotoxins. And what would these be like? Well, it causes infertility or reduced fertility. It causes an enlargement of the uterus, which could include fibroids. Causes inflammation of the uterus and cyst formation on the ovaries. It can cause the placenta not to come out when the baby comes out, and you get placental retention. Have to have a D&C to get rid of it. They might end up later on in life with vaginal prolapse, vulval swelling, decreased libido, vaginitis, inflammation of breast enlargement in females, miscarriages, stillbirths, reduced fetal weight, as well as decreased milk production. For men, certainly feminization, because they're getting estrogens, right? Testicular atrophy, probably not on anybody's bucket list. Decreased spermatogenesis, not making enough sperm, and the sperm aren't very viable. Male breast enlargement, after all, it is estrogens, right? And premature puberty, which is odd, huh? So, molds cause all kinds of funny things, and we just weren't made to live in a moldy environment. And let's get back to this miscarriage thing. Environmental mold exposure increases risk of miscarriage. That is the loss of pregnancy or spontaneous abortion. And so having trouble carrying a pregnancy, having trouble with fertility, it might be where you're living. And let's just talk a little bit more about breast cancer. The risk goes up 54% with exposure to environmental molds and their toxic metabolites. And then there's cervical cancer. And I think this has to do with the fact that you have all these hormonal effects, but uh, mold increases cervical cancer by 6 times. I should have an S on the end of time there. 6 times. That's quite significant. So now, one of the things we said that was a fermented product was alcohol. And 60,000 of your friends and neighbors die each year from cancers caused by alcohol because it's got the mold factor: throat, mouth, voice box, liver, colon, prostate, and breast cancers, all from alcohol. And tobacco, too. Now, I toured some tobacco um, drying sheds and stuck my head in there, and they were full of mold. And in fact, some studies have looked at this and said, it's not so much perhaps even the tobacco that's causing the cancer as the fact that it was all cured in moldy buildings, and the mold impregnated, uh, infiltrated the product. And so when they smoke this stuff, they get or use it as an oil in a vaping uh, cigarette. They get these toxins, these metabolites from the fungi, and then they end up with a dose of cancer causing or autoimmune disease causing toxins. So the liver is sort of your cleansing organ. And so if there's lots of aflatoxins in some food or in your environment, the risk of liver cancer skyrockets in the presence of mold. Um, The World Health Organization spends time looking at major health issues around the world, and one of them uh, was uh, was liver hepatitis B infection and the resultant cancer. And they discovered if somebody lived in a moldy environment or had mold exposure, their risk of liver cancer from hepatitis B went up 200 times. That's quite a bit. Another study looked at this and said that they could map out from hepatitis B 60 times increased risk. So these are serious things. You might want to fix this. It's not doing anything. Sorry. Throw the moldy food out. If you have food that has mold, don't keep it. Don't try to cut off the mold. You ever take a piece of bread that had mold on it somewhere, hold it up to the light, and just tear it, and you'll see all kinds of filaments of mold and see them stretch, and it's quite an interesting experience. So it's hard to get rid of mold, even when you don't know how far it's gone in the food. You get a little mold in one part of the food, and pretty soon it's everywhere. Now, cheese is definitely going to be a high risk for mold. I mean, it's well involved in the process. And so consumption of specialty cheeses increases the risk of gastric cancer by 12.6 fold, 12.6 times. Esophageal cancer goes up with more mold. And one of the ways that people get mold is if your country doesn't grow a lot of its own wheat, barley, corn, and imports it, it's usually carried across the ocean in a barge, and you're sitting on top of water. It's hard to keep the moisture out, and so you're going to end up with high levels of mold. And this is a big issue for countries that do a lot of importing of grains: Saudi Arabia, Turkey, even some in India. And so they test the grain products, and they give a number to decide whether it's good or not, but none of them have zero. And so this is one of the reasons why I believe people have trouble with wheat these days. There's a lot of exposure to mold. Now, as the mold grows and it gets in your intestines, if you eat it, there's an effect on your intestines. It changes your gut flora. We call it the gut mold connection. And so what ends up happening is your guts are not populated with as good a bacteria. And you sort of get what we call a leaky gut syndrome from the inflammation created. And the result is that you're much more likely to get allergic reactions to foods, intolerances to foods, um, more likely to have autoimmune diseases, more likely to have chronic fatigue, um, fibromyalgia, um, brain fog, irritable bowel, all these kind of things, ulcerative colitis kind of stuff. Now, we mentioned all the symptoms earlier, but I'm just kind of going through these again in a little more detail. Allergic rhinitis, that's when your nose is always running. And I've noticed this when I've been in moldy environments. My nose is always running. And you get sensitized to the fungi, to the mold, and then you're more likely to have colds and flus as well. And sometimes we don't realize where in our environment the the mold is, but the results are asthma, 180% higher risk, rheumatoid arthritis, 360% higher risk. So just be aware of that. And then it can go from your throat and your nose and so forth down your throat, and you end up with it in your lungs. Get bronchitis from mold and mildew. Get asthma from mold and mildew, and so it's yeah, it's quite an effect. Now let's get back to behavior changes that result from these molds in your environment. You see, these mycotoxins increase aggressive behavior. Here I got a picture of a dog, but I'm not just talking dogs. That's people too. And hyperactivity. And so you mentioned in that video about the kid having hyperactivity or ADHD. And yeah, it destroys concentration, makes the neurons irritable. They can't settle down and just focus. And then you have more pain and neuralgia. Human exposure to molds, mycotoxins, and water damaged buildings can cause neurological and neuropsychiatric symptoms. Many of these clinical features are partly mimicked or be similar to classic neurological disorders, including pain syndromes, movement disorders. What's an example of movement disorder? Parkinson's, delirium, dementia. What's an example of dementia? Alzheimer's, and disorders of balance and coordination. So, serious stuff. And so, if you have mold in your basement, it could be why you have a failing memory. Studies show that. They could check the people in the house. Yeah, memory's failing. Go look in the basement. Voila. And so this leads to Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, all coming from your basement or the food you're eating. And yeah, increases your risk of dementia. Another thing it does that's sort of interesting is it raises your cholesterol. And yeah, cholesterol and phospholipids. And this is so why do I have high cholesterol? Why would somebody be complaining of high cholesterol? Maybe it's the mold in their environment. It's quite a link, and it raises your blood pressure, more likely to end up on hypertension pills. It increases gestational diabetes, that diabetes you get when you're pregnant, and type 1 diabetes, which is the diabetes I mentioned earlier about the young lady that got type 1 diabetes with the compost heap outside her window. Um, and it definitely affects the thyroid. Mycotoxins are endocrine disruptors. These molds make it so that your hormones aren't correct and cause thyroid inflammation, hormone disruption, and negative thyroid receptor changes. This isn't good. And so the thyroid um, um, can't work like it's supposed to. It can't make the hormones. The hormones don't work like they're supposed to. All kinds of things break down in the whole system from from first of all um, from the nutrients needed to get into the thyroid to make thyroid globulin or T3 and T4, and then what the T3 and T4 thyroid hormones do when they get to the tissues gets deranged. Nephrotoxicity, and so this leads to kidney damage, kidney failure, kidney dialysis, TB and mold. Many people who have TB may have had the predisposition by being in a moldy environment, and then they got exposed to the the uh, the TB bacteria, and they got tuberculosis. So what do I do? I mean, it's like, okay, well, how do I make sure I don't have any mold in my house? Or, well, you can buy mold test kits. I've gotten some before, and when I got these mold test kits, I take them around the house. You follow the directions, and you sample here and there, and then you put the mold test kit away in a dark corner for, a week or two, and it starts growing stuff. And I know here in America we can just get these kits down at it's like Bunnings. We call it Home Depot, Lowe's. I don't know if you get them at Bunnings there in Australia or just where, but you might have to go online and get a mold test kit. It's basically a petri dish with a media already in it. And you can see here by the picture, send you some swabs that you can swab things, um, and different sampling things, and then a reagent there you can put in with it. What do I do if I find I have mold? What do I do then? And we had this up in north of Townsville. We got mold in our house, and so we basically got some sprayers and put water and clove oil in them. You can buy different products that have a reasonable effect for plain sheetrock, no paint. Um, let's see. I'm trying to think what we call sheetrock in Australia. Anyway, the board on the walls with no paint. The best cleaners are Borax or Lysol all-purpose cleaner, Orange Breeze full strength, or Orange Glow, a multi-purpose degreaser, or Fantastic Orange Action. These are ones we have in America. Again, I use clove oil. I thought great, and it's antifungal. You can also wipe down walls with vinegar. It helps to kill the mold, although vinegar itself is a fermented product, so that's a big question. There's other products you can buy on the market um, that are for mold. But what about the ozone? I mentioned ozone, and here's a picture of an ozone machine. Um, and you can buy them on the internet, buy them on eBay. They can come from China. The one I showed you here earlier came from China, I'm sure. And the ozone increases this ozone, O3, in the air, and it tends to beat back the mold. But if you haven't killed the mold and it just keeps growing, this is a temporary measure. It does help with the dust, it's got mold, but you don't want to live in an area where you're running too much ozone all the time because it's a bit hard on you too. It's an oxidizer. Sunlight, though, is the key. Here we got a picture of a building with good big windows. That's great. You see the sunlight coming in. That's what you want. And so good window frontage toward sun areas, that's going to be the best thing you can do. And then just keeping everything clean. Keep it clean. Fresh air, exercise, pure water, and clean, sweet premises are within the reach of all and of but little expense. That's what you want. Lots of good cleaning going on. Make sure that things are not accumulating. No dusty corners, dust under the couch, dust underneath the furniture, dust in the corners, because the dust grows mold. And you're going to end up with more aflatoxins. And so now in fighting mold, the part of your immune system that's especially important is the CD4 T cells. And they orchestrate the immune response against mold. And what you want to think about is certain lifestyle factors that will improve the function of these cells. And here I've got two columns I'm going to go down. One is improved by, the function is improved by, and the second column is going to be hampered by, or disturbed by, or destroyed by. And so fasting, doing a 3-day fast resets the immune system. And a lot of times we find fasting helps the white cells. So if we can improve your health by fasting, that's good for mold. Caloric restriction, don't overeat. That doesn't help with getting over a mold exposure. Certain minerals, selenium, zinc, those are very good. Certain phytochemicals like lycopene from tomatoes. You know, we talk about lycopene for prostate. It's also good for mold. Omega-3 fatty acids, such as you'd find in flax seed or nuts and seeds. Alpha lipoic acid, vitamins D, B7, and vitamin A. Try to find foods with those or get your sunlight for the vitamin D. Exercise is helpful because when you exercise, your circulation improves. And then another thing that's very helpful is iodine. In fact, iodine is the chief, I should probably put it at the top of the list. It's the chief um, element that, or mineral that is going to help your body fight mold. If you're low in iodine, you're going to get a lot more candida, which is yeast that's related to mold. You're going to be much worse off. So if you can get more of this iodine, it's going to be toxic against the mold. And it's used, so in the hospital, you can use iodine for killing mold, surface mold. But uh, I have people that I work with, I put them on a regimen of taking iodine. You can buy iodoral pills. That's one source. And I usually put people on about 50 milligrams a day if they're fighting mold stuff. What hampers your immune system? Being overweight. It's serious because your body's always putting off oxidized lipids if you're overweight. High fat diet that gets you there, and sugar. Sugar creates inflammation in the body, and mold's already creating inflammation, so they sort of work together. Butter, and this is part of high fat diet. Salt, too much salt is, and there's studies on all this stuff. But a high salt diet is going to make it so that your CD4 cells are not going to fight the mold as well. Your CD4 cells don't work as good in somebody that's overweight on a high fat diet, eating sugar, butter. Pesticides. And you think, what are some examples of pesticides? Well, especially pesticides that have neuro effects, um, such as your pyrethrins, that kind of thing. In summary, mold increases inflammation and suppresses the immune system. Those two things together right there set you up for all kinds of diseases, such as cancer, autoimmune diseases, respiratory tract infections, and other diseases. Solutions include cleaning your house, your yard, or moving to a drier area, getting fresh air and sunshine, and eating a nutrient-dense, immune-boosting diet. So there you go. And so I'm going to turn off my screen share, come back to the program here. All right.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Clark. This was, I guess you can say, a little bit depressing, but also encouraging because so many things can be traced back to mold, right? But also the solution, a lot of them are, either pretty cost effective or don't cost anything at all. So it is good news in the end, right?
Yes, that's for sure.
Yeah. So we just want to encourage everyone that has joined, send in your questions because we have a bit of time to answer those questions. But yeah, some of the comments that we got, one of our viewers is saying that she's thinking about investing in an air doctor. So it's pretty much the same thing, I guess. It fights off any airborne particles, viruses, and fungi. Is that right, Dr. Clark?
I'm assuming the Air Doctor is a brand name of some air purifier that includes putting out ozone and negative ions, and yeah,
Mm.
no, we got a couple of those. I showed you the one I have right here. It's worthwhile having, and sometimes if I get into a new space, I'll just take out the ozone machine and run it for a day before I go in there. It's important to
Okay.
knock out the mold for sure.
Yes, and another thing I've actually tried, because I could see the kids are a little bit sniffly and they are getting sick. So I put some of my iodine Lugol solution that you recommended a while back, Dr. Clark. So I put that in the humidifier, and I would say it helped. I don't have proof, but they didn't get full on sick. I know that. So it's just maybe something to consider for everyone, because obviously drinking is one thing internally, but to let it, with the humidifier, just be dispersed throughout the whole house might be a good idea. So
Yes, no, that makes sense, and the iodine definitely goes into vapor very quickly, so that would be filling the air with this to help knock down the mold.
yeah, especially for little kids, because you don't want to get them to drink with the same dose, especially that you would drink. But nebulizers, yeah, can be a good option, I guess.
Yes.
Um, so I think also you mentioned, a few things, Dr. Clark, that we can actually make a list of, a shopping list, and also what to avoid. So yeah, I would like to encourage everyone to maybe put it in a list, the things that we do need to avoid, and also the things that we can buy. I'm definitely going to buy a few things from Bunnings. Check out if they have the mold test kit, and I'm definitely interested to see whether we are exposed to mold, because we can be. It's very likely. So things you mentioned, Dr. Clark, were foods that can grow mold. And one of those things apparently is rice. So peanuts are one thing, and then rice is another thing, you would know. And you mentioned vanilla as well. I believe that all of these things that we wouldn't think about are actually manufactured or processed through fermentation process, or there's some type of mold involved. So it's a bit scary, but yeah, I guess good things to know and to avoid, right?
Oh, yes. Yep. Forewarned and prepared.
Yeah. And I do sometimes clean the house. Again, just as extra information, I just want to mention that I do clean the house with vinegar and bicarb. So I think borax has some type of bicarb element in that, or not. What would you say, Dr. Clark?
It's mostly boron, and boron is a very good preservative. You can use it for pressure
Mhm.
treating lumber, and it's a much more healthy than the copper naphthenate green stuff that they use in some pressure treated lumber. And it's used in making lines in fields for playing like footy or soccer or whatever, and it not
Hmm.
kills the grass actually in high concentrations. But it definitely is good for mold treatment. So you can buy it as borax as a hand cleaner. I mean, it's a soap, um, or as a clothes washing detergent extender. At least over here. I can't remember if I saw it over there much at all, but yeah,
Yeah, I used to put a little bit in the wash, and it didn't make a difference in terms of, it didn't discolor the clothes or anything. So I tried just with the washing powder to put a little bit of the borax as well. So um, yeah. So
yeah,
now you mention, yeah, it's a good idea, definitely.
yeah, and it's fairly inexpensive if I remember right.
Yeah, it's not very expensive. I was surprised as well, and it's like a multi-purpose cleaner, right? You can use it for lots of different things.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and of course you mentioned sunlight as well, which is free. So I guess God has provided all these things for us that can be used for free, and cleanliness as well. So that's interesting and really good to know.
Right. Julie does a whole talk on sunlight. This business of sunlight, we think it's only for vitamin D, but there's a lot of other benefits, and of course, mold control is just one of those. The more you can have light come in, the more the light can come in, and perhaps even having your bed sheets thrown back so the light can hit that area. I mean, you think about I was studying this on people have feather pillows, and they'll have a feather pillow, and over time it gets heavier and gains weight. It's because the dust mites live in the pillow, and they leave all their feces in the pillow, and then that grows mold, and the pillow gets
Wow.
heavier with dust mites and moldy products, and then you get sick from laying on that pillow. Much better to
Mm.
have a pillow that isn't perhaps feathers, so you can wash it more readily. Um, there's places where mold hides.
That's incredible. You even mentioned the dust overall. If we don't dust it often enough, dust can grow mold as well. So it's pretty, sobering to think that, yeah, we do need to think about all the corners and everywhere that we can have dust where we don't think about.
Yeah, yeah, cleaning house is good, and vacuuming out the corners, and when you have a vacuum, you want one that doesn't put the dust back in the air. So having a vacuum with a HEPA filter, or one of these vacuums that sucks the stuff through a water bath, those are very good. Um, yeah, you don't want to blow it
Wow.
back in the air.
Mm. Because yeah, it does happen from what I understand. It kind of circulates some of the air. It doesn't get rid of all the dust and it doesn't suck up all the air, right?
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
I don't know what was over there, but over here we have rainbow vacuums that are the water that you fill them with water, and then the air from the hose goes through the water, and that pretty well gets all the dust out of the air being sucked
Mm.
through it. And then the ones with HEPA filters, oh, I forget the brands. Most of them you can get most of vacuums have that option, or at least they'll be very quick to tell you if it has that option.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. We were actually thinking about a new vacuum cleaner, so we may ask about that. So is it like a water bath system, did you say, Dr. Clark?
Yeah, it's like the bottom of the vacuum cleaner is like a bucket. Well, not that deep, but one we had was about 4 inches deep, and you had to put about you know, probably 3 or 4 liters of water in the bottom of it before you started it up, and then you started it up, and then it was sucked the air from the hose down through this water, and all the stuff that you sucked up got stuck in the water, and then you went and dumped the water outside somewhere.
Mm. That makes a lot of sense that it's trapped in the water, as opposed to just circulating and going back into the air again. Or even when you are emptying the vacuum cleaner, a lot of times you have to be really far from it so that it doesn't affect you as well, so you don't breathe that in again, right?
Yeah, and in these water vacuums, you can put your iodine in the water, or you could put clove oil in
Mm.
the water, or some other essential oil, and it'll blow that back out into the air.
Wow, good idea. Yeah, really good. And we may at a later stage ask Julie to maybe do the sunlight talk for us because yeah, it is a really good topic. And also sometimes I put things out in the sun that I want them bleached. So sunlight also is a good alternative for bleach from what I've understood.
Yes, definitely. And it's my impression that clothes hung out to dry in the sun are more healthy than ones dried in a commercial dryer, or in a electric or gas dryer.
That's true. I guess sun is antibacterial, so you would think that again, God has provided all these things that we don't have to necessarily
Mm.
buy products to, solve that issue of antibacterial cleaning solutions and stuff. The sun is there for that.
Oh, yeah, and some of these antibacterial solutions are toxic in and of themselves. People poison themselves with what they clean their houses with.
Or alcohol based.
Oh, yeah, or
Mm,
alcohol-based.
yeah, because sometimes you mentioned alcohol as well. A lot of the times I struggle to get like vanilla. If I use it, they have alcohol as well. So it's not just the vanilla. You mentioned even the vanilla itself. Even if you get the pods, right? It still includes some type of fermentation and some type of mold, but they have alcohol as well. So, can we cook that off, Dr. Clark? Can you cook off alcohol or mold for that matter?
Well, our counsel is that the alcohol always leaves traces of, evil behind.
Mm,
Uh, it's, it's yeah, it's like, once you've dried out your house from being wet and has mold, does drying it out fix it? No, doesn't fix it, the mold's still
mm,
there. So same thing with the alcohol, you dry it out, you're just left with the mold behind.
mm. Because alcohol has got mycotoxins as well, right? So I would assume same thing with mold. It would also leave some type of residue.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Mm,
I would expect
yeah.
that.
Yeah, okay. And I also remember you were talking about mold on a different platform, Dr. Clark, and you said mold is mold. But do you know if there are any types of mold that are more dangerous than the others, something to like stay away from? Anything we should be looking out for? Like if it looks like this, then stay away from it. If it smells like this, then stay away from it.
Certainly, the black mold is very dangerous. Often comes in the base of your shower and bathrooms, around toilet bases. Aspergillus mold. That's the mold on peanuts. Has got the highest level, I
Mm,
believe, of aflatoxins. And so peanut butter is usually suspect. Better to have almond butter or sesame seed butter or
mm.
something like that than to try to do peanut butter. Um, yeah, so those that's the top one is Aspergillus. There's other molds though, and I wouldn't consider any mold to be, beneficial.
Or benign.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
benign.
Yeah, okay. That is scary. But I have found that sesame seeds even smell like peanuts, so I guess we can swap peanut butter with sesame seed butter, and you get used to it, I guess. Same thing with cacao and carob, you get used to it, and then after a while you don't want to go back to that. And I think you mentioned as well probably that cacao is one of those things again that needs to go through some type of fermentation process, right?
Definitely, it's part of getting its bitterness taken down. The fermentation process helps to reduce that.
Mm. Yeah. So, and peanuts as well. They are not a nut, are they? It's not even something we should be roasting and eating, right?
Well, I mean, if you can get them free from mold, they're not as nice or as nutritious perhaps as almonds, but there's a place for them. We aren't totally discouraged from them, but we are told that other tree nuts are more healthy. They're really a bean. They're related to other beans, legumes, and it's just the fact that they have to be harvested wet, and it's hard to get them dry. They are kind of high in fat, and the fat ratios make them so they raise your cholesterol, even if they are the best quality. So that's sort of like cashews will raise your cholesterol.
Mm-hmm. True. They will. Yeah, because they are high in fat, right? And especially if you roast them, the fat separates. So, yeah.
Yes, the fat separates, and when you roast them, it also makes a bit of trans fat.
Yeah. True, true. So I guess in their natural form, everything.
Yes, the more natural, the better. I mean, some foods you can't eat without cooking. It's better not
Yeah.
to eat grains without cooking them, but yeah, more natural, the better. I mean, like Adam would have eaten.
That's right. Yeah. More of a raw and even soaked, I guess. We have our nuts soaked, and not everyone enjoys them like that, but that's how I make them. So one of our viewers again says, just to think that mold can cause so much harm to the human system, and most of these illnesses are treated by prescription drugs while the mold continues to do its dangerous work on the system. Very good point, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And so then you have to suffer both from the mold and from the prescription drug.
Exactly. And you mentioned a whole host of other diseases and autoimmune diseases as well that most likely are going to be treated by other drugs, right? That will leave their own side effects.
Oh, absolutely. They tend to give people with autoimmune diseases some kind of immunosuppressive drug. And then you just end up with more problems from diseases that take advantage of the fact that you're immunosuppressed.
Mm, true. And mold, you mentioned, affects the immunity. And yeah, it's incredible. Sometimes we have, even I sometimes have these allergy-like symptoms. And because I know I don't have allergies, I'm thinking it must be because something is wet and has grown mold, or um, even like you mentioned, Dr. Clark, if the wind is blowing towards you from, let's say, moldy oranges in the vase or something, that can also um, affect the health, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Anytime the wind is coming across something moldy and then coming to your house, you're going to get all that aflatoxin or mycotoxins and all kinds of things that are a result of rotting, fermenting, aging, spoiling.
Hmm. And a lot of the times we are advised to wear gloves and mask. I heard that's pretty much the only time we should be wearing a mask when we're dealing with compost or mold.
Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah, and then we have another comment. Hurricane windows which cannot be opened to let fresh air into the apartments, placed into old buildings, and no wonder that the ambulance is always called for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's a lot of so as we've traveled around the United States recently, we've always looked for hotels or motels that had windows that could be opened. And
All the way.
oh,
Mm.
well, at least some,
Yeah.
somewhat, so that you get fresh air. And it's sort of a thing of the past. It's only the older motels that have them, it seems, or the yeah,
Mm.
and a lot of the big new expensive motels have these yeah, like you call them hurricane windows that can't be opened. And I mean that means you're going into a room essentially that has the air that's been in there since the building was built and probably has some of the air, the first air that the first people that stayed in there breathed, and then the second people. I mean, it's never is the window doesn't open. The heater or air conditioner only is for that room. It doesn't circulate anywhere else. And you got to wonder, is there any fresh air anywhere? Is there any oxygen in the room?
Mm. That's true. It is scary to think about it because I know that sometimes if you go, some bathrooms can have it, this double type of windows that the glass is kind of like double glass that has a little bit of space in between, but you can't really open it. So, um, and just the things that we can actually be exposed to on a daily basis. I remember when I was growing up, we had this string type of cheese that had blue on it, and I liked it. I never thought of it as something I should not be eating. No one said, hey, maybe you shouldn't be eating mold. It was like a delicacy if the cheese had mold on it. So it's just incredible that we eat that, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, that would be those specialty cheeses we mentioned in the talk. Stuff that's yeah, you can see the mold blue cheese. I mean, that's got to be the worst stuff. Parmesan cheese, the stuff that comes in the canisters and you put on stuff. It's way oxidized, way. Yeah, that stuff's not good.
Mm. It is, yeah, it is scary to think about it because we were exposed to that. And it also, I find that I get used to the smell. And even now, when I smell moldy, something moldy, I'm thinking, oh, that doesn't smell too bad, because I'm used to, when I was growing up eating that cheese, I associated with food. So that's one of the dangers of, I guess, what it can do to you sometimes. But you said you can smell it, right? So can you always smell mold?
Well, that's a good question. Um, if you're used to living in a mold-free environment and then you go to a place where there is mold, you definitely smell it. If you're used to living in a moldy environment, you've become acclimatized to it, tolerant of it, and you might not smell it. So,
Mm.
for me, I've I've been around people and I said, "Well, let me come smell your house," and I just smell the mold. They don't smell it a bit because they've been living there.
Mm-hmm.
You lose the ability to detect it if you've been living in it.
Mm. One of the dangers, yeah. And yeah, I can sometimes, I can smell as well in hotels. If I go to a hotel that I can tell that, damp, wet, and not so fresh smell. And I do chat with people sometimes that they will say that they have allergies, or I've had a chat with someone that said the kids are always sick. And I said, "Do you have mold in the house?" And she said, "Oh, we probably do. It's wet. They can see the wet on the ceiling or on the walls. It doesn't really dry." So she said, "Yeah, we probably do." So I was like, "Well, we got to get out of that house, because that's probably why the kids never get well."
Yeah,
So,
yeah, for sure.
um,
This is mm.
and yeah, I just want to ask if everyone has any more questions, because how can we check for mold? The question was, how can we check for mold? I guess you did mention the mold test kit, the visual. I guess if you can see wet or moldy, any other ways, or that's pretty much it, Dr. Clark.
Yeah, well, if you're experiencing symptoms, I would certainly be looking for it, and and you have to look in all kinds of places. Sometimes it's not apparent. Sometimes you have to be a bit of a, what would we say, a detective. And so we lived in a house where um, one roof came down and stopped at a wall of another part of the house. And so the water would come down that roof and then it would go into a gutter, but the gutter wasn't very high. So if the water came down really fast, it would go over the gutter and down into the wall of the house. And I
Mm.
came across a man who had been involved in remodel or refurbishing the house for us to rent. And he says, "Yeah, that wall there was clear full of mold." And so I went and looked. I said, "Wow, okay." Wasn't much we could do about it, so we moved out of that place. But yeah, it's and it can be hidden. I mean, and you have to sort of have a high level of suspicion, and then you look for things like that, places in the. So we lived southern Queensland, and so had a house that I was suspicious of. So I crawled up in the attic with a bright flashlight and looked all around, and especially when it was raining, to see if I could see any place where it might be getting wet. And then I went on top of the roof and replaced a few screws or nails so that they would be more watertight.
Yeah, and sometimes we have found that you can have animals that die behind the fridge or something. So it's probably good to just pull out those like electric appliances or fridge or gas or whatever, and check once in a while right behind them, because they can be mouse that has died there, and you're smelling something and you don't even know where it's coming from.
Yeah, I was in one apartment where a mouse got in the wall, and you could hear him jump up and down because he couldn't get out, and then he died, and then he stunk. And you're like,
Oh.
"How do I get this guy out of the wall?" So I didn't want to tear the wall apart, but I found a way to access the top of the wall where there was a hole in the wall for electric cord to go through. And so I took a whole box of baking soda and poured it down through that hole where that mouse was. And in a day, the smell disappeared. So I basically buried him in baking soda. And
Wow.
that was my way of dealing with him. But yeah, mice will die. They'll be behind you. Yeah, like you say, behind your fridge, under your bed, who knows where. And they definitely, as they die, they have all kinds of bad things come off of them, and the gases, and as they
Mm,
putrefy and ferment
yeah.
and die or decompose. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did put on the screen your channel, Dr. Clark, rev14.com. It's pretty
Yes.
easy to remember. And you have a whole host of presentations and handouts, right? I've got the link to your handouts as well. Some really good information. And you've got recipes as well, right? I have seen some good recipes as well on your website. So if anyone is interested, that's where to go.
Definitely. Yep.
Yes, and you have lots of different presentations on different channels as well. I know that you were on 3ABN. It was still up until recently, we were able to watch those presentations, and 3ABN also has handouts from you that I've still got some of them. So I guess anyone that is interested, you are on 3ABN. And also there was another YouTube channel that you've got most of your presentations on. And I believe that is Prophecy, Zoom Prophecy. What was the title?
Zoom International Prophecy School. If you go to my website, to the first page of the website, then down the left-hand column, the buttons there, the bottom button is Zoom presentations. And so whenever I do a presentation, I try to catalog it there and make a link to it so that you can go right to it. And so that covers different Zoom topics that we've done.
Very good. So we have some presentations with you as well on our channel. So anyone that is interested for to look into the previous sessions. And yeah, the last comment we will read and then we will wrap up. Sherry says, "This was great. Thank you to both of you for taking your time to share with us."
Amen.
We definitely are very grateful for your time, Dr. Clark. Our suggestion for next time, which will be 24th of December. Is that right, Dr. Clark? 24th of December, which is, well, it is for us. So for you, it's 23rd of December in the afternoon. So our next session is that time. We'll just confirm with Dr. Clark again.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes, and we have another session 31st of December. And we also encourage, if our viewers have any topics that they would like to suggest, please do so. You can email us at takechargeofyourhealth101@gmail.com, and you can just make your suggestions as to what you would like us to talk about next time. And for next session, Dr. Clark, we would like to suggest that we talk about hydrotherapy.
Okay.
Okay. So I think that's one of the suggestions that I got a little while back. So I think a lot of us will be interested in that. So we want to thank you very much, Dr. Clark, for your time and for the wonderful information. I think we can take a lot from this and avoid and replace with good things. So we can ask you if you have any closing points. If not, then we will ask you also to close with a word of prayer, please.
All right. Thank you, Sosie. It might seem daunting that everything in our environment has the potential of having mold, but if you're experiencing some kind of health issues, it's worth looking into, because that might be the hidden link to why you're sick all the time. And it might be what would, in fixing it, might fix your health. Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, you said that Jesus came to this world to bring life and bring it more abundantly. And Lord, as we learn how to cooperate in that process of obtaining life, especially physically, we pray that we'll be diligent to keep our premises clean, that we'll make sure nothing that's decaying or rotting or spoiling is in our diets or in our environment, that these things that are really the effect of sin are dangerous. And we pray, Lord, that you will um, address the curse of sin as found in mold in our environments. Help us to understand how to eradicate it. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you again, Dr. Clark. Looking forward to seeing you 23rd of December for you in the US, and then 24th of December, 10 a.m. in the morning for us. So God bless and see you next time.
Thank you, Sosie. I look forward to it.
See you. Okay. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. Please remember our next session is 24th of December, Australian Eastern Standard Time, 10 a.m. And again, suggest the topics that you wish for our guest speakers to cover. Please visit Dr. Clark's website, take advantage of all the handouts and presentations that he's got available for us, and check out the description box of this video for any additional information about our ministry. If you would like to become a supporter, we've got the details for that as well. And our website will be ready shortly. We are hoping to finalize everything shortly and have that available for you as well, with all the resources and everything. We will go again into more of a regular routine from next year, from January, and we have some exciting presentations and interviews and wonderful speakers that will come on our channel to share. So share with everyone as well. We do believe that we are living in the end times where we don't have that much time left. So let's educate ourselves. Let's share with everyone who could benefit from these presentations. The times that we are planning, but God will lead, are every Friday evening, 7 p.m. Again, Australian Eastern Standard Time, which is Brisbane time, 7 p.m. Friday evenings, and 10 a.m. Sunday morning. These, if we can, will be live predominantly. If not, then they will be pre-recorded. So God bless you again. If you have any more questions for us, again, please email us at takechargeofyourhealth101@gmail.com. And you can also find us on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, Signal as well. So we're looking forward to hearing from you. Until next time, God bless, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.